Stramash. It'll just take a wee bit. Right, we are live. Good morning, everybody, wherever you are in the world watching this. This is Stramash Media with myself and Johnny McNeil. We are called Beyond Orwell, and we'll be looking at Scotland beyond politics. And today, Johnny, I thought we'd kick off with the news this week of Epstein Files and how it relates to Scotland, indirectly, I guess. But the royal family look in tatters right now because of the Epstein Files. What's your take on it?
I think what's actually taken, because obviously we've known a lot, well, some of the kind of superficial level information of, the former Prince Andrew's involvement. However, it's kind of been regurgitated again as such. And I think it's possible that they have to militarize. They have to enact, as it were, Operation Yellowhammer, because long term, they're over. They're finished. These kind of globalist cartels are done, and they know that the truth is catching up with them. So they're between a rock and a hard place, and they know they've got to militarize. Problem is, they're only going to get one opportunity to do it successfully, which I doubt very much that'll be the case. And so what I see is the new, revelations, which at the minute aren't really revelations, because obviously we've been, introduced, we've had knowledge of this. I think what it is it's trying to stir up, anti-establishment sentiment, anti-monarchist sentiment, angrily, however, in conjunction with what's going on in the States at the minute. I've seen a lot of traffic, particularly on the cesspit that is X, which is pushing the 9/11, kind of truther narrative. Mm-hmm. I'm totally on board with that. The problem is that those leading the conversations online, just like as with what happened throughout on both sides throughout, the Brexit referendum and the independence referendum, they are themselves outriders, working for the establishment, trying to generate the agitation and the anger in order to provide the pretext for militarization, to then blame the public.
Well, before we get to that, Johnny, because there's a whole hour of this to go, it just seems to me that the public are angry right now, and they know this. So they're throwing out some tidbits to us to quell our anger so that we can blame somebody. But if you recall back to when Andrew was first accused of sexual advances, let's call it that, they paid £10 million. We don't know if that was 10 million is an exact figure even. Now that was paid out of British taxpayers' money. Nobody seemed to bat an eyelid. So what I'm thinking is they'll put Andrew up as this figure of hate now, and somewhere along the line he'll be turned into a victim. He himself will be turned into a victim, and then people will start to come back again. We've not learned any lessons from the £10 million fund that was given over, because we're still going back to this default position of waving flags at the Queen, or not, sorry, the King. So what is this thing about Andrew all about?
Yeah, it could be, a kind of deflection tactic to basically, claim that the royals can police themselves, because obviously they're above the law. We know this, always have been.
Yeah.
And so, a demonstration that they can police and they will police themselves. But I think, and I wouldn't rule out, that he's some sort of decoy, for this. But I think the principal point is to sustain this holding pattern of anger, of agitation that we've been held in for years now, through all different forms of narratives. And this is just another one that's come along. I've been reintroduced into the fray.
There's a poll out today, Johnny, or last week, sorry, I just caught it today. Ipsos have come out, Ipsos.com, and the popularity of the monarchy has dwindled to 37% across the UK. 37%. Now, reasons for this are wide and varied. The death of Diana, for example, Camilla coming in, the Epstein files, the death of the Queen, all those things are putting into the mix. And now we're seeing 37%. It's the lowest it's ever been, Johnny, for this establishment. Now, just remember, this establishment is there to create a class system. It creates a mythical figure, a family that we all have to bow down to. Most of us don't anymore because of social media, etc. So the question this morning is, are we seeing the end of the monarchy?
In a word, aye. You know, we're witnesses to history in that sense. You know, I believe it will ultimately collapse. The power that it once had, I mean, I wrote a piece years ago, that was in 2017. I called that patriotic programming. From toddler to teenager to tabloidhood. And it was about essentially how in a pre-adolescence and throughout adolescence as well, that, you know, the messaging in schools, you know, and in television when that became, you know, popular and everybody had one, certainly throughout the broadcast mediums, has always sustained this mix of monarchy, military, and Union Jack. And it was conventionally, you know, it was conventionally associated with the Conservative Party, right? But obviously they've had to change the colour of, and you know, the Conservative Party and Labour they are the party, and they always have been, you know, they have been certainly since you know, World War II. And so all they do is they change the colour of the party every so often. And this is why Starmer, you've seen photographs of him in military uniform.
That's right.
You should always worry when politicians are getting into military uniform.
I know.
You know, and making the Labour Party appear more patriotic, because that pre-adolescent programming between the monarchy, the military, and the flag, completely indivisible. They're now obviously as the patriotic kind of element. They're trying to claim that now, and that power that they had over the baby boomer generation, post World War II baby boomer generation, and Gen X, so us, has evaporated with you know, the Queen pegging it basically, as we all do, you know. And that having evaporated, and people haven't had the same indoctrination, pre-adolescent indoctrination for Charles. They've been trying it, you know, since it was obvious he was going to become king. They've been getting his portrait into schools, you know, in order to familiarize, you know, his image with children. Because when we look back and search back in our memories, our memories are often emotionalized with the time. This is why nostalgia is one of the key aspects of propaganda, because people always hark back to what they perceive were better times.
Yes.
And so all that, you know, I called him in that piece the hypnotic head of the cartel, right? And that's what they've been. And what we're finding is with the demise of the monarchy, it's like, you know, it's like what we perceive as the Scottish independence commentariat as well. The demise of the monarchy is like watching, you know, the in slow motion, the Twin Towers collapsing onto their own, or three buildings collapsing in onto their own footprint, right? And it's all happening in slow motion. And it is an analogy as such.
You mentioned baby boomers, Johnny. It's interesting how a generation was. I mean, the Queen was ubiquitous. We had her on stamps, we had her on pound notes, we had her everywhere. Even the television used to stop and play the national anthem. And so these things were ingrained in people, even without them actually knowing and allowing them into their headspace. They'd got there eventually because it was everywhere.
Yeah.
But this new generation doesn't have that. And I'm just thinking, because this, and let's face it, the royal family, let's call them that for whatever other thing we can call them, royal scroungers or whatever, they are part of this hierarchy of control, as well as the Vatican, the politicians everywhere. They're part of this, and their greed and to be part of this has caught up with them. And I think there's no way out. They're between a rock and a hard place, and how they measure out their next move is going to be very interesting. I see already they've got TV personalities claiming that if you put the royals out in the street and jail them, they'll have nowhere to go. You know, the victim mentality is starting to creep in. This is Dimbleby. I don't know if you saw that.
I didn't know, but it's a very narcissistic approach, right? Whereby the persecutor, right, plays victim. And let me show you something. I wasn't going to necessarily introduce it, but keep it handy in case that a moment comes up, if you like, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that is why, I don't know if this is central, that is why my fictitious state is narcissistate, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's made up of if I ever get a chance to do a revision of this, I'll add the church to this, right? But it was the crown, the company, and the corps politique, right?
Yep.
Because the characteristics of your typical narcissist is exactly what the UK, the United Kingdom, Great Britain, plays out,
Mm-hmm.
right? It persecutes, it basically abuses, and then when it's the Cartman, it plays out the Cartman drama triangle in essence. And there's a a chapter in there. What was it? Kitchener's Cartman kleptocracy, the KKK. Anyway, so the characteristics that a typical narcissist will play out behind closed doors when they're abusing a partner is the typical characteristics of a fascist state. Right now, you mentioned a point. I can't remember what it was you actually said there, but it brought me to this, which I've pre-prepared this one. So the monarchy is in demise. Which means the institutions, the institutions it depends on, and vice versa, are like an incestuous symbiotic relationship, right? The monarchy needs the institutions, the British institutions need the monarchy, right? They all rely on one another to survive.
That's right.
Once one set goes, in particular the monarchy starts to go, the institutions and this so-called country that calls itself Great Britain, right?
Yep.
Will also start to crumble, right?
Do you mean, Johnny, that they're intertwined so much that they even need the royals? It's in English history, whereas they need to have, for example, a royal assent on a bill. It's got to pass by royal assent. Now, what does that mean? Somebody from royalty's got to sign it. It might not be that, but on paper it is.
When you think about that,
it's all intertwined.
Yeah, absolutely, mate. Absolutely, but it's not just the the legislative aspects.
No,
and the passage,
the ceremony.
All that stuff. But it'll be the truth that brings them down will then start to make people understand just how much of a propaganda state they're actually living in and have always lived in, right? But before we get to that point, this was a quote by a guy called Webster Tarpley. And I had this one years ago, which I've quoted in a number of my pieces. And it was a speech he gave, or a talk he gave, about how Edward VII started World War I. Now, Edward VII actually died in 1910, right? So before World War I started. but he had people in place and mechanisms in place to engineer, because the backdrop of this was Scottish Home Rule
Yes, indeed.
was gaining ground before he passed away. The Irish late 19th century, so you got the black famine, Irish black famine in 1847. So all these things were happening whereby the Celt nations were trying to break away, right? And then suddenly, World War One comes along when we had the Home Rule Bill going through in 1913. And this is what Webster Tapley says about the monarchy, right? There is no reason to assume that with the British monarchy having weathered numerous storms, that it will ever be swept away. We must rather conclude that the royals will stop at nothing, including a military coup, a fascist dictatorship, or World War III to avoid giving up power. Now, it's not just the monarchy, it's the entire globalist establishment.
That's the point, Johnny.
Yeah,
excellent.
Of which the monarchy are but, this hypnotic head on this island, right?
That's right.
People entranced. And they've already been trying to start World War III, and they have been since 2017. We've seen that via Ukraine, we've seen it via Taiwan, we've seen it via the genocide in Gaza, where they've been trying to draw Iran into war.
That's right.
The fascist dictatorship element is coming, or the military coup, and then fascist dictatorship is coming. Yep. This is Operation Yellowhammer that we've been trying to get through to people to get them to understand, right?
Yep.
It's the Operation Yellowhammer that the entire, the leading commentary act, right, throughout the Scottish independence, campaign since 2014, have deliberately propaganda omitted from the narrative, from the discourse, right, because the independence referendum itself was a ruse, right? It was a ruse. And we can know this because not only did they have Operation Yellowhammer in place, right? They had something called the 1973 US-UK Lines of Communication Agreement, right?
That's right.
This is so important. This is so integral, right, to what it is that we're actually dealing with. Now, why would, right, the British state allow, as a matter of a democracy, right, a rich colonial state, a colonized state, to leave of its own accord? It was never going to happen, right? We were suckered in and we were indoctrinated. We went through 2014, 2016 as well for the English, if you like, with Brexit.
Yep.
Right, but 2014, we were indoctrinated and during a drawn out process to gain our emotional capture, right, and to solidify our ego defense mechanisms, because we placed our emotionalized trust in these figures, right, many of these figures who still dominate today, right, and so what would end up happening was we would end up defending the views of those very figures, right? Because we're so emotional. And this is it's once we're emotionally captured, and once you're trying to tell people they've been fooled, then they don't want to know, because nobody wants to know. Like the abusive relationship behind closed doors, nobody wants to know that their wife or their husband's having an affair somewhere. They blanket until at such point they've got to face up to it. And this is what the UN decolonization thing that then came along. I mean, my spidey senses were straight up on that, because what that did is what I could see straight away, knowing full well there was no democratic route out of the union, knowing full well, right, that what the UN decolonization route did was give off this sense that there could be a peaceful way out, right, but also that it fed into this illusion of the functioning democracy. And then out of that, obviously, that came to an abrupt end with, some financial irregularity. Somebody didn't get, on the agency side, didn't get paid. And then, and that was called salvo liberation, right? Which then we saw the leading, if you like, the faces that are recognized of the new Liberate Scotland. Right. So what they've done is they emotionally piggybacked the liberation element of that for Liberate Scotland.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm telling you now, you're all being led down the garden path.
Well, this is interesting, Johnny, because since that time where, let's mention people, Craig Murray was the face of Salvo Liberation. I even had the opportunity to interview the guy, and a more vacuous person about the whole system you'll never meet. And the thing about this is he's gone on to go to the Supreme Court in Scotland. He's gone down to speak to political parties in England. He's flown over to America. You mentioned, Johnny, they couldn't pay their bills. Who's paying for the bills for him to fly all over the world and take the Supreme Court to task on things? Where's all that money coming from? You're right, Johnny. This has been hijacked. We're emotionally spent on this.
Yeah.
And I would like to get back to this this Operation Yellowhammer, how it's very important for people to prick their ears up and get a hold of this. Because today we're talking mainly about the monarchy and how if the monarchy collapses, then other institutions will collapse. To prevent them collapsing, they will pull out all the stops. This is what we're trying to put across this morning. They will put out all the stops. And if they have to militarize, they will, because their power base cannot be destroyed in their eyes. And this is where Operation Yellowhammer, and it's written down, Johnny. You've got it on your Gaslight and Gilligan. It's out there for people to see on the internet. And if it's been taken down, I've got copies myself. If you want to see it, the Internal Market Act is out there for you to read. You can see written down plainly that if there is an emergency, this word in brackets, emergency, then the Scottish Parliament, the Senate, and Stormont will be closed, and martial rule will be pervade. Johnny, what is an emergency? It's anything they want it to be, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And they've been trying to create that a national emergency, as I say, via war, and trying to get NATO into war in Ukraine specifically, because then what that would do is provide the pretext for the UK government to send British troops over to Ukraine, over to Europe, but also bring in US troops into UK, because what they need is the British troops gone, because British troops, even though history has shown us that English troops predominantly, what they did during Bloody Sunday in Northern Ireland, Scots as well, did in Northern Ireland. But I think we're a wee bit more mature than that now, not as bigoted. And so I think British troops in the main would struggle to open up, would struggle to fire on, UK population, whereas US troops wouldn't, right? US troops would just get on with it. And plus they would think that they had, moral authority to do so, because it's legislatively backed by the Internal Market Act, right? So if soldiers perceive themselves to have a legal permission to do it, then they'll also perceive themselves as having a moral authority to do it, right? And it's just as a wee lesson, and this is where history is replaying it again, which people are just not paying attention to, right? The civil rights movement in the late 60s, the civil rights movement in Northern Ireland, obviously knowing full well that the Catholic communities were being persecuted for for jobs and housing and the rest of it. So the civil rights movement in Northern Ireland took a leaf out of Martin Luther King's book, right? Because they'd seen the pictures of him on telly, right?
That's right.
And they took a leaf out of his book to do the peace marches, right? The British state understood this, knew what this meant, because the British condition itself, the British presence, was starting to wane in Northern Ireland, right? And so they'd done boundary changes to ensure that unionists could stay in political power. And all these things were slowly but surely, falling away and having less and less effect. So I contend that the British state deliberately started the Troubles, deliberately put the paras in there, right? An incredibly effective fighting machine in high intensity conflict for war, right? But not for, peacekeeping in a civilian population, right?
No.
So deliberately put the paras in there in order to stir up that to carry out those killings, in order to become, and when the killings were carried out, to become a recruitment tool. So Bloody Sunday became a recruitment tool for the IRA. However, being as brilliantly Machiavellian as the British state is, it already had a number of its own IRA players in situ, right?
That's
And
right.
one of them was called Freddie Scappaticci, right? His
Mhm.
code name was Steak Knife.
That's right.
He was a chief intelligence officer for the IRA. One of his roles was to root out British informants, right? So he killed people, he tortured people to death,
I know.
right? Being a British agent himself, right?
That's right.
This is what they intend for Scotland, and it will be our own leadership, right? So those who are still leading us down the garden path, right, like Swinney, right, for example, and I
Yep.
can see him play. Once I looked into the history of the Irish Civil War,
Me
and I
too.
read a number of speeches by
De Valera.
Eamon de Valera,
Yep.
right? And I was watching Sturgeon at the time as I was processing her behaviors, right? That's when I thought, right, well, hold on. If it was anybody on the Irish side, right, who played the key role in ensuring that an Irish Civil War took place, it was Eamon de Valera, right?
Yeah.
And I suspect that this court case that Murray's taking now is to throw up this ruling that Scottish institutions, including Holyrood, can make their own decisions out with UK law, and so that somebody like Swinney, somebody in political authority, will say UDI, Unilateral Declaration of Independence, and then basically roll out a red carpet for the British state to censure.
Exactly. Johnny, it's chilling when you speak it like that, because I've been reading Irish history as well. And Michael Collins, and this is supposed to be the brains of the outfit, was doing a deal in Ireland in 1920 or something, but way back, on devolution. They were actually making a deal with the British on devolution. And it was a case of the James Connolly's of the time were later on coming through. They were saying, no, you can't have that. And just like the arguments that are getting played out in Scotland, where we know that devolution, devolved power is retained power.
Yeah,
they were back then. They could see that as well. But the people at the front, the Michael Collins, De Valera, they were hedging their bets for this devolved kind of system that Scotland found itself in.
Well, De Valera was anti-treaty, right? Collins was pro-treaty. I understand. Listen, I'm not judging what the decisions these people. Well, I am judging De Valera. I since found a book. I haven't read it because it's so bloody expensive. I since found a book that somebody else has written. I can't remember the author's name. It's called Eamon de Valera, England's Greatest Spy.
Yeah.
So I think there's some credence to the, what I was thinking. Collins, I'm not judging because, they were up against the might of the British state. They just endured World War One. They'd all come back, and now they've got the threat. Churchill's basically threatened them. He was working on behalf of Lloyd George. Basically threatened them with another all-out war, which Collins knew they couldn't win, and so he was content to try. Well, not content, but I guess being astute enough, pragmatic enough to take what was on the table and then slowly but surely, bit by bit,
gradually,
from the Free State scenario into and Dominion status into a truly independent Ireland. But the thing is, right, Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael, right, they are the Orwellian party representation in Ireland. Same as Tory Labour over here, same as bloody Republicans and Democrats, right? from the outset, the two main parties in Ireland post Civil War have been tainted with British state interests, right?
That's
This
right.
is why the Garda are effectively run by, by the British state, right? Their intelligence services are effectively run by the British state, right? It isn't, to all intents and purposes, still a dominion, right?
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I would never judge Michael Collins, because I understand why he wanted to take the path that he did. But similarly, if it's not UDI, right, over here, that that Swinney declares, let's say, for example, it'll be things like, the British state want to keep Faz Lane. They want to keep Aberdeen. They want to keep, a percentage of the oil fields. They want to keep this, that, and the next thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you're right. They can have absolutely no, because they can have absolutely no control over any aspect of Scotland. They have to be gone financially, economically. We need our own currency, right? We need all these things. The problem we've got is those with the know-how. Most of them are already part of the gig.
Yeah. It's just this weekend, Johnny. Reports are coming out that Alba, the political party, are now not being able to fund any of their candidates for the upcoming Scottish election due to financial problems. Is this another diversion away from Andrew, away from the monarchy, away from everything else to keep us bemused on social media?
Certainly gives us something to talk about, doesn't it? I've held on to, okay, so for me, absolutely, Alex Salmond was played. He was surrounded by people who told him what he needed to hear. Like all of us, he was susceptible to, his emotional biases and his ego, right? Just like all of us. And he was surrounded by people who were going to eventually set out to destroy him. I think Kenny McCaskill is in a similar boat. I think he is not, he just hasn't got the ability to see. He hasn't acknowledged Yellowhammer. Do I think that makes him actively complicit? No. But neither does he have the balls to visit it, to get it out in the open, right?
Yeah.
He's not leadership material. As eloquent as he is, as articulate as he is, as knowledgeable as he is, he's not leadership material. So that meant the Alba Party, once, Alex had passed, was in the hands, effectively, of the charlatans from the SNP, so Hanvey and Regan, and McElhenney. And so, McElhenney was the one that suggested that a direct border at Edinburgh Airport between the US and Edinburgh Airport be made, right? And, that one is sus straight away, because then you've got the SNP and Swinney backing British troops to go to Ukraine.
That's right.
Right. So that would be all the bloody Scottish troops, right? Gone. You've got Freeport Kate Forbes, right? Freeport Forbes has okayed all the, the free ports and SECs and such, right? An illegal construct in themselves as part of Brexit, which is an illegal construct in itself, right? And to see the full potential of these free ports, we've got to be in a national, we've got to be in a state of emergency, right? Because the military, in order to basically rape Scotland of its resources the way they want to from coast to coast, right? They need a national emergency with military backing to do it, right? They haven't been able to get that. No. And so when McElhenney's, when he was with Alba at the time, proposed this US border at Edinburgh Airport, that was going to be a corridor, a direct corporate military corridor, right? For US, US security intelligence services, and quite probably private military contractors as well.
On that, Johnny, it really does ask more questions of political parties, why they can sign up with Tory government ministers and free ports, as you alluded to. And then when two people on a boat that's moored inside Scottish waters, and the courts say these people should be protected, and John Swinney doesn't know anything about it, it's undertaken in the middle of the night. These corridors are working all the time. And these rendition flights we used to have coming into Scotland. There's so many things that any person worth their salt trying to get independence for their country would be walking a million miles from what the John Swinney has walked into. And he's walked into it because he's part of it. He doesn't know anything better. And he'll talk and he'll talk and he'll talk about independence. But the truth is there for you to see. How far have we got towards independence since 2014? I would say we've regressed, Johnny, under the SNP. We've gone back the way because nothing's happened.
Yeah,
and
but even more.
The air's been taken out of the tyres because of these political parties.
We're even more because in 2014 there was essentially two sides. There was independent supporters like us, and there was unionists. There's two sides in Scotland.
But it's a construct, Johnny. It's good versus bad.
But now and now you've got the independence movement, which is so fractured. So yes, we are in a far worse state, and that's been a role all along. And that's the thing. To win us, this is beautiful. I love this quote. To win us to our harm, the instruments of darkness tell us truths, and with honest trifles betray us in deepest consequence. Right?
Yeah.
Macbeth. Right now, that's the thing. It's like, and as I said a couple of weeks ago, the most compelling and captivating of lies have an element of truth to them. Right. So this is why we started finding out more about what, the Scottish case for independence. It's part of the reason why we had the UN decolonisation process. We were finding out so many truths because the truth is used to capture us emotionally. Because when people are telling us what we want to hear, we struggle to see through their other lies. Right. The lies being like by propaganda omission of Yellowhammer. And so, we're in a far worse position, mate. And one of the key aspects of the, so if we've got elements of these little, is Alba a distraction? Is what's happening with Alba a distraction? We've got all these, these fracture points, right? Then one of the, the larger fracture points, which, the Asian grooming gangs is another narrative, right?
Yeah.
So basically, what we're to do, what the working class, the white working class, are to do then is look at all those Asian, all those brown skinned, not to look up above everybody, that's supposedly leading us and causing these problems, but to look across society at the brown-skinned guys. Now, I saw again, it came up on my Facebook. Can't I mind her bloody? It was Michelle Dewberry, right? Who entered the scene in a reality TV show, right? This is how it works. So it's one aspect of how it works. Entered the scene in a reality TV show, right? As a no-nonsense kind of entrepreneur. Then she became a commentator. Then she's ended up on GB News. And I see this feed coming through. I don't follow GB News. Why would I? Because I know that GB News and Top News and Farage and UKIP and Reform have all been British state projects all along.
That's right. Exactly.
And there's this argument that Michelle Dewberry is involved in with some Labour spin doctor, basically stirring up and saying, why didn't you expose these Asian grooming gangs? What they conveniently leave out of it. I mean, the Epstein stuff's obviously going on in the background. Yeah. We've got but this Kincora Boys Home, the MI5 set up cameras to film You
Yep,
know,
exactly.
their plants in there, Dolphin Square. You've got all the Savile stuff with and the photographs with him with King Charles. So all of these things are not existing each in a vacuum, right? They all have the cumulative effect on us, right? They're all, in essence, taking a toll. And one of the things that's actually being missed out at the moment, and this came up when it was a platform I didn't even recognize, but I verified it. There is a gap in the Epstein files of the released, thus far released Epstein files, right? Between 1991 and 2001. So between September 98 is the last one that's been released, and January 2002. So that's a huge gap. They're calling it the canyon at the minute. So it's a huge gap of people who were involved not only in the Epstein files, but also in 9/11. All right. And people like Howard Lutnick is the one that springs to mind, who shorted airline stocks and some of the airlines that were involved in 9/11, just before obviously all that happened. And so yeah, there's a lot of important information which has been left out, like that gap, like Operation Yellowhammer, like the US-UK lines of communication agreement. Lots of information which is being obliterated from the mainstream narrative, even online,
but
to prevent us knowing what's fully going on.
On that, Johnny, I was on the Epstein files, because you can actually go on the Department of Justice and the US government and look at them. A lot of them are redacted, but some of the things that, if you can look past the code, it's a very loose code, pizzas and things are used, but you can see the horror, the horrific atrocities that go on. And I'm wondering, do we get to a saturation point? Is that what they want from us? We're saturated with all this news and this abominable stories about what's happening to children and death to babies and drinking the blood of babies, and we get to a cut-off point, and then we become nihilistic. That means we don't believe anything anymore because it's too much for us to process. And what we'll do as a group, as a species, we will go to places where we don't hear that kind of stuff, and the wheels will carry on moving as before. At this point, we have to be really brave and say, this far and no more, because this goes against all our social values, all our social ethos. Killing babies for their blood. You've got to be kidding. Having a dentist chair to take the teeth out of young boys because it would bite you. My goodness, Johnny, it gets worse and worse and worse. So what I'm asking today is, do we as a people reach an idea? We just can't go any lower than this, the snake's belly, before we become so repulsed we put it to the back of our mind or we ignore it. And this is what they plan for us. This is what I feel, Johnny, is being manufactured in the months and maybe the next wee while to come. We'll get so annoyed with it, we'll turn it off. Like Gaza. We've seen all that. And we still get pictures coming in. And we scroll fast past them because we can't. We have no space in our system to have more empathy anymore. We're spent. We're becoming, like in Orwell's story, dystopian. And I just think that even though we're getting all this information from Epstein, this is deliberate. They're pushing all this stuff out so that we can get really fed up with it at some point, and then there'll be a football match we can, oh, thank goodness the rugby's on or the football's on. I can, relax myself watching this. I can get angry in a different way. It doesn't ask questions of me. Do you know what I mean, Johnny?
Aye, absolutely. It's part of that kind of, the very kind of human mechanism for self-protection, self-preservation, and if people have got avenues to have a more comfortable life, despite what they know is taking place, then they'll take that. I've come to understand the human condition is by and large a very cowardly one. It is. I mean, I'm not judging people. I'm the same, I guess. Or in some ways. I mean, I've been to war. I'm doing this. I've done this largely on my own since 2017, since going to the diplomat building in Berlin and warning them what was coming. So I'd like to think I've got some courage. However, when it comes to your normal, average middle class person who's got a fairly comfortable life, and we've got a large middle class that's been diminishing, but a certainly large middle class who are very comfortable with their lives. They just don't want to get involved, and where we are still in their hands and always will be, because as we ourselves have demonstrated, we're incapable of acting on these atrocities to any real effect, and so we're in their hands to a degree still, because we will not do anything until it directly affects us, right? And that could be something like obviously a war, but wake up one morning to find that all our bank accounts have been wiped, that there's another bank crash,
our pensions have gone.
Something. So all the kind of mobile comms is down. Everything and anything that's going to affect us directly, en masse. And until they do something like that, or the food stops flowing, if they start cutting off kind of food supplies, if that starts to affect something along those lines.
And again, Johnny, we've got to repeat the Operation Yellowhammer. We can see that in America, the ICE movement. This is a federal organization from nowhere, relying on big, huge alpha males to beat the living crap out of people for their skin color, or for any small reason that they can show their authority. They can even, as you said earlier on, Johnny, once you've got the state behind you, you can shoot a woman in her car driving away because you'll be protected by the law, because that's your orders. And to shoot a man on the ground, 6 of them, and he still couldn't hold them down, and they pumped 6 bullets into him with cameras and everything there. This is not a fiction. This is not a movie. This is happening. And I think we're coming to a point, Johnny. I was trying to make the point, I'm becoming nihilistic. We don't believe anything. Because it's safer not to believe everything. The truth is so dangerous. I'd rather prefer lies given to me to keep me happy, sedated. But when you're looking at these things and they're going to be upon you because the system is crumbling, we are not wanting to be ruled over by a paedophile family anymore. If you take that paedophile family out, the whole system crumbles, and the system that connects that is the government. That will crumble, and the institutions, the City of London, will crumble. It's so massive. What will happen if the royal family fall? But I think we're at this point, Johnny, where we've got a choice. We've got a stark choice. Do we want our individual freedoms? I haven't had freedom, and you haven't, Johnny, since we were born. We're locked into a system that puts us through a school, takes us away from our parents, locks us up in a shoddy building that's leaking, and getting taught by one person. That is not good. And then when you leave that, you're going to university, you're indoctrinated again. And when you come out of that, you're perfect for the workplace. You're never free to do your own thing. So are we at the point now then, where all these factors we've talked about on the show today, is this enough to tilt the balance against those who have been ruling us for so damn long?
With the caveat of a trigger, and that trigger is out of our hands.
Right? How do we create our own trigger?
We're not going to. You cannot. None are more enslaved than those who think they're free.
Yes.
Right? Gota. Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
You've got whilst the illusion, the left-right illusion of functioning democracy continues, right, and the bread and circuses all continue, right. people will not respond. People will not react together, right? They would sooner end up fighting each other, right? That I understand what you're saying about nihilism and to try and drive a nihil by releasing these these heinous bits of information, but driving nihilism makes people just couldn't care less. It's not that they couldn't care less. It's just that there's something deep within us,
Yeah.
right? A self-preservation mechanism that will not allow us to respond unless we are acted against, right? And you made a very good point there earlier on. Well, the two instances of the woman being shot in a car by ICE, right? And the guy who was protecting the woman being shot on the ground, right? Executed, essentially.
Yeah.
Right. Now, if you think that that's not coming here, you're in cloud cuckoo land. People
You
are in
are.
cloud
Exactly, John.
cuckoo land, right? And if you think that an independence referendum, was real and we were going to be allowed to leave as a matter of democracy, and the UN would actually recognise Scotland as a colony through that decolonisation progress, you are being led over the bloody rainbow to a non-existent pot of gold. You're being played, right?
Yep.
That is coming here. All that remains to understand is how they're going to trigger it, right? And how many of us they're going to take with them.
Some
it's
people
not
watch
a nice
this, Johnny.
thing to think about, but that's the fucking reality. That's the realpolitik, right? That your so-called independence activists, the one that are leading the conversations and have done since 2014, and the SNP and ALBA and the other breakaway, the kind of keep the name, the recognised names of the Liberate Scotland, right? Who've all kept stum about Operation Yellowhammer and the US-UK lines of communication agreement.
Yeah.
British state has never once let go of a weaker colony peacefully. Never once. We're no exception.
Do you think, Johnny, even this podcast will be too difficult for a lot of people watching to process and to try and fix on it? Or do you think we're in a different position now? We've got room to say what we want to say.
I think that it will still be too much for some people, but in saying that, others are more open now to these things that we need to talk about, whether they like it or not. We have to talk about them because that's the reality. It's the ruthless, and it's a German expression, realpolitik. It's the ruthless reality of politics, right? It's not what you want to be true. Emotionally, we might want Scottish independence. We might want it via peaceful means. That's not fucking happening, right? It's not going to happen, right? Wake up, right? Snap out of it. And those kind of lower level, the names we don't know. I saw you share somebody's post who's running under the Liberate Scotland banner. It'd be unfair to mention his name anyway, for me. No, I mean, unfair on him for me to mention his name. But anyway, I don't recognize his name, right? That's a good thing, right? He's not part, as far as I'm aware, of this kind of fucking Machiavellian scheme, right? So he should be looking at Yellowhammer, looking at the lines of communication agreement, and all the other ones whose names we don't know, in generating these conversations and getting Yellowhammer into the discourse within Scottish, and then start asking why the people that are leading that Liberate Scotland movement are not themselves telling us about Yellowhammer, because they're lying to us by omission.
Well, here on that, Johnny, talking about political parties wanting to get into the Scottish Parliament, it's just I'm put off Scottish politics now. I really am. I've got nothing left to wish for from the Parliament. It's a not even a parish council anymore, if it ever was. But there's people going in there taking an allegiance to the crown. Again, these people are fighting tooth and nail to be Republicans, but yet to get in there, they'll take the oath. And I'm battling with this all the time. How can you take the oath to this system, But they're saying that you have to take the oath or you won't get a seat and you won't get a voice.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, what voices have we had for the last 20 years from the Parliament?
Yeah. It's is it Hobson's choice? But it's no choice. Let's remember,
it's no choice.
Right? Exactly, it's no choice. And so let's remember that the Irish Civil War was in part started over having to make an oath of allegiance to the British Crown, right? And this is why you had the Free Staters and the anti-treaty, so the pro-treaty and anti-treaty, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's the Free Staters obviously being the pro-treaty. And so, whilst I think it's all theatre, right, I would be suspicious of any politician who's kept fucking stum on Operation Yellowhammer, right, since that came out, but made a big deal of not giving the oath, right? And the reason for that is because they stay stum on the important information and make an agitprop play of something that we just might have to live with, right, for the time being until it's all exposed. But I tell you what, it's not worth it's not worth a single person dying over. No. Right? And for any youngsters, any young men in particular watching this, right, where you're, independent supporter or a curious unionist who's listening to our conversations about the globalist establishment, right? Do not get involved in fighting. Do not take a side, because your sides are already led by those who are part of the cartel. Right? That's right. Just as they did in Northern Ireland.
That's right. Can't say any better than that, Johnny. But I do know that my correspondence from this a couple of shows ago, a couple of young guys were talking about having Irish ancestry and they could get a passport, and they thought they'd go over there, live in my area and come back. And I'm thinking, no, wait a minute here. Have you heard of Snake Knife? It's corrupt. You'll never win through that system. All you'll get is grief and hardship and death. You have to work carefully on this, and you have to do podcasts, and you have to say to people through voice and listening and actions, do something for your own sake. Johnny, once somebody said to me last week, or I read it somewhere, we're traveling on this this planet and it's orbiting around the sun. At some point, we've got to make sure that we live from cradle to grave in happiness and enjoy the fruits of nature and be at one with each other. Why are we fighting with each other all the time? Because when it's a sense of chaos amongst us, we're never concentrating on those who are doing us ill harm. And that's what we've always got to remember.
Yeah, control through chaos. That's what they do. That's what your typical narcissist, especially covert narcissist likes to do. They create chaos in order to maintain their control over their quarry, over their victims. And it's the same, for the cartel. The idea that we're a rock floating through space, I've actually used that, to keep myself, because bear in mind, I've been dealing with this since 2016. All right, and I went public with it in 2017, June the 25th, 2017. And so this idea, that we're, that one day Andromeda is going to crash into us. This idea, it helps kind of ground me a wee bit. It helps kind of but yeah, listen, mate. There's no magic wand. The truth, and speaking to each other about Yellowhammer, about the lines of communication, US-UK lines of communication agreement, these very basic but integral truths, right? And we need to get that widespread. We need to have people talking about it in the streets, right? So that the people in England are talking about it in the streets, right? And then that will provide the additional context to understand that the hard Brexit construct was a propaganda war all along, or the Brexit kind of referendum was a propaganda war all along, in which the left and right sides were fixed. And previous to that, so was the 2014 independence referendum. And what that did was those who were pro-independence in Scotland, we were inculcated, were emotionally captured by those who thought, in order that we would end up, defending them when we got to if we got to this stage, which obviously we have. But
I always think, Johnny,
the lion.
Yeah, I always think that when in 50 years' time, when we look back at this period of history which we're travelling through right now, it will not be kind to those independentistas who are trying to lead us to the hallowed land. It will not be kind, and we'll revert to another book, perhaps by a new George Orwell, telling you how the dystopia in the next century will embellish your systems because you didn't learn the lessons of before. We cannot go walking like headless chickens through life. We have to do something. I would urge anyone else to join in with a podcast, put their point of view across, do it calmly, do it strategically, so you can get all your points across the way you want to get them across. Give examples, give people something to chew on, to take away, and get really angry with. And when you're angry, then you start thinking. And when you start thinking about your own place, then you start doing. And it's one of the things that brought you, and probably me as well, Johnny, to where we are now. The anger, the misinformation we had, and then I want to change that. And this is why we're on doing podcasts and things, because we've come through that process. I want everybody to come through this process. It's painful, it's hurtful, but you've got to do it. You've got to come to a point where you say, I've had enough. I've had enough. I need to do something different. And with that, Johnny, we've just come to the end of our podcast. I've really enjoyed it. And I know we talk about bread and circuses, but Scotland beat Wales yesterday at a fantastic game of rugby. And England lost. Take from that what you will from this podcast today. Well, Johnny, always great to talk to you, man. We'll catch up next time when we're available. But thanks for watching, folks. And if you can, like, share, press the bell notification, and you'll be told about when we're coming on next. And listen, have a good Sunday. All the best, Johnny.
Cheers, buddy. Take care. Bye, everyone.
And you, pal.